afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you, first and foremost, for having me this afternoon. It's a beautiful, beautiful luncheon, and I always appreciate being here with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to care about who your judges are and who you are going to be voting for. It has been my absolute honor to serve the citizens of the state of Florida since 2018, and I continue to do so. Please let me know how I can service you better if that is the case. I would first like to bring up Group 9, please. Group 9 candidates, thank you. And I also want to say that Judge LeBlanc sends his love to everyone in this room. These are very big shoes to fill. He is a mentor of mine, and we dearly love him and miss him. So thank you. All right, ladies, are we ready to go? All right, I'm going to give you 2 minutes each for an opening statement. We have our timekeeper here in the front, and I'm going to start with Miss Allison.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the League for hosting this forum for us today. My name is Allison Kerestes, and I've been an attorney in the Central Florida area for the past 16 years. Prior to law school, I spent 6 years in customer service and advanced to management before I went to law school at Florida State University. I spent the first half of my legal career in public service at the state attorney's office as a prosecutor. I handled everything from battery and domestic violence to sex crimes, including the civil commitment of sexually violent predators after their prison sentence was complete. After 8 years, I left the state for private practice and opened my own law firm with my husband, Steve Kerestes. As a business owner at Kerestes Law Firm, I've handled civil litigation, foreclosure, landlord-tenant, collections, a little bit of family, and a lot of criminal defense. I decided to run for judge because after 16 years in the courtroom, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the qualities that make for an excellent judge. I realize that I have a lot of the qualities that I'm looking for on the bench when I walk into a courtroom. In addition to the knowledge I've gained from working in different legal fields and as on both sides of a case, I've also got a lot of life experience as a business owner, as a mother, and as a customer service manager. I have a unique perspective that not all attorneys have when they become judges. I've talked to thousands of law enforcement officers, witnesses, and victims, and I've also had tough conversations with people accused of a crime and their family members. This kind of real-world experience is especially important not only in our criminal courtrooms, but in civil, delinquency, dependency, and family law cases. As the most well-rounded candidate, I ask that you vote for me, Allison Kerestes, on August 23rd. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? All right, I didn't think there'd be a problem. My name again is Olga Pappas. I'm a proud member of our League of Women Voters. Thank you for having me here today. This is a critical time in our community, our state, and our nation. Let me be clear. This is a critical time in our state, community, and our nation. I'm here today because I am the candidate with the experience we need right now. Experience such as working on a small long-shot project called Fair Districts Florida, along with Dan Galber and Ellen Frieden. Experience like given to me by being a 2-time Florida Bar Public Service Fellow working in civil rights under the late civil rights attorney Neil Shonin at Southern Legal Counsel, and in our Legal Aid Society here in downtown Orlando, helping people stay in their homes, helping victims of domestic violence become safe, and helping families get through the most difficult times of their lives. Folks who didn't have the money to pay for an attorney. And this is experience I've had before ever becoming a lawyer. As an attorney for the past 10 years, representing our community, our families, our neighbors here in Central Florida. As a personal injury attorney, I've had the honor of representing people like Ms. Tara Vincent, a retired police officer with your Orlando Police Department forced to retire early because of a rare medical condition, treatable by only one medically necessary prescription. And when United Healthcare unilaterally decided to terminate her coverage because they thought she was too expensive to keep on their rolls, I had the honor of representing her in her fight, and we won. So that is one example. But I, in a weird way, I'm not here to talk about myself as much as why this is needed on the bench right now. So, one of the other things you should know in terms of legal experience, like so many of us, of course, I practice in state and federal courts all over the areas, and I'm being told to stop, but let me tell you this. I believe that the justice system should work for the people, not political agendas, that the law should be applied equally and with dignity towards all who come before it, and that a judge should be focused not on herself, but on the well-being of our community. If you believe the same things, I'd be honored to have your vote on or before August 23rd. Thank you.
All right, thank you, ladies. So I was told by Gloria, if I don't cut off these ladies and gentlemen in the next group, I will be thrown out of here. And Gloria's the boss, so please do not hold it against me, but I'm going to have to cut you off once the time is up, okay? All right, so we all know that judges must have a certain quality to sit on the bench and to serve our citizens. I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Pappas and ask you, what are the qualities that you embody that will serve our community as a judge, and what are the important qualities of a judge?
So, having shadowed our judiciary over the past 2 years, during the worst times in all of our lives, this pandemic, I can tell you that one of those qualities is patience. Patience with the people who come before you. Most people don't realize that, we see a bunch of lawyers in court, but actually for most of our divisions, people don't have the money to have an attorney. So it's the judge who ends up acting as their legal counsel, if you would. It's the judge who has to help them solve their problem when they show up in court with a subpoena. As someone who's been shadowing our domestic violence units and family courts, I've seen it firsthand how important it is for that judge not to see the person before them as just another number for expediency to get by, but to take the time, have the patience to listen to them, to help them solve their problems. And I would have to say that next major quality has got to be a combo of true grit and determination. Folks, right now, we have a historic backlog.
Okay, that's time. Thank you. All right, and Ms. Kerestes?
Well, I would agree with Ms. Pappas that you do need a lot of patience. There's a lot of pro se parties that come to the courts that don't understand how the legal process works and what they can and cannot say in the courtroom. I've seen that a lot in the collections, in small claims collections and landlord-tenant, where parties just don't understand what they need to tell the judge. I also think that experience is incredibly important. I've had over 45 jury trials and about 200 more non-jury trials. I go to court every single day of my career, and I've appeared in front of more than 100 judges. So I've seen firsthand what works and what doesn't work in the courtroom. One of the things that I've seen that is so important is an ability to manage the docket timely. I've got great time management skills as I'm also a mom, and I've had to run a law firm. I think that's so important because when people come to court, they don't want to sit there all day and wait for their cases to be heard, and neither do the lawyers. We've learned during the pandemic that we can use virtual means a lot more than we ever have in the past, and it would be my goal to continue that and allow court to move as efficiently as possible.
And that's time. All right, ladies, it's also very important to know what you did in private practice or what you are doing now in private practice. So I'm going to ask you, what is the most important case that you have ever worked on, and why is that important to your career, and how important that will be as a judge, and why?
Okay, the most important, I've worked on a lot of important cases, so it's hard to pick one, but the most important case that I've worked on in recent times happened in August and July of 2020. The school systems were being attempted to be reopened, and a lot of teachers were very scared. So I, along with Jacob Stewart and Billy Weiland, filed the first lawsuit to require the government to allow virtual school to occur for the next school year. We were successful at the trial court level, but then the case was appealed to the first DCA, and unfortunately we were not successful there. I think that case was so important to me because it was an issue that mattered to so many people. As you may be more aware, the teachers union also filed a case that ran in conjunction with ours. We were the first to file. It was an important issue to us to understand the feelings of the teachers and also the parents who were afraid for their students to return to the classroom.
And that is time. All right, Mrs. Pappas?
Well, just as my colleague was saying, there's sort of a tie going on with my mind, but I sort of previewed one of those cases, the case of Tara Vincent versus United Healthcare, which is also listed on my website. It was a case to where her mother came to me and said, 7 other law firms have rejected my daughter's case, but I want her to live. Can you figure something out? And so much when you're a lawyer, particularly a personal injury lawyer, you've got to be creative. You've got to figure out what to do to solve the problem. And that's what I'm proud to say we did. We ultimately were able to get United Healthcare to not only come to a confidential settlement, but I can say make sure that my client remained on that life-saving medication for the rest of her life. That's just one case. I can tell you another. Sharona Sampson versus A to Z Auto Parts. A case where my client was a victim of a hit and run, high speed, broke her neck, killed, as a result she lost her pregnancy. The driver then,
Sorry. Thank you.
I'm full of interesting tidbits.
All right. I know you ladies and gentlemen would like to know more about both of our candidates, but at this time we have another group, so I appreciate your time and willingness to serve. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I'm going to ask Circuit Group 14 to come forward, Judge Beamer and Mr. Michael Stewart. Okay, gentlemen, as you know, once the timekeeper says stop, I must say stop. So please do not hold that against me. Okay. It's very important for us to know a little bit about you and your background. So please let us know what experience in your life or your legal career has caused you to want to be a judge. And we're going to start with Judge Beamer, simply because his name starts with a B.
I think I started this journey wanting to be a lawyer.
Oh, my apologies. We have to give an opening statement.
I didn't want to presuppose anything.
Okay. All right, so we can start with your opening, 2 minutes.
I grew up in the hills of Northeast Tennessee, and my parents, they worked 2 jobs at times to make sure that we had everything that we needed. One of those jobs for my father was a paper route, and as the oldest of 3 children, I ran alongside the family car with him before the sun came up and delivered papers to our neighbors. That set a foundation, and I kept running. That's how I paid for college on an athletic scholarship. Currently, I'm sitting in the domestic relations division as a judge, but my experience as an attorney, I think, is something important to know as well. For over a decade, I was a trial attorney. I handled over 10, exactly 10 jury trials, with the majority of those being lead counsel, and actually in charge of pursuing the case and defending the case. But I've also had experience in the appellate courts and argued in front of the district courts of appeal. And so I know all aspects of civil litigation from trial all the way through the appellate process. And I brought that experience with me to the bench in serving in the domestic relations division. There, I'm dealing with individuals who share their greatest hopes, their darkest secrets, their greatest fears with each other, and now they find themselves at odds. And oftentimes there are children involved. And what I do is I bring all of that experience as a boy, as an attorney, I bring that to the courtroom and offer them, provide them a fair, a considerate, and an experienced opportunity for someone to hear their cases I think it's very important that they understand why I rule the way that I do. Finally, I'm proud to say that I have the support of Commissioner Robert Stewart, Commissioner Tony Ortiz, the Mayor of Belle Isle, the Mayor of Ocoee, the Mayor of Oakland, and most importantly, the support and love from my family, my wonderful wife Denise, and our 3 children between the ages of 2 and 7. So if anyone has any tips for that, I'm all ears. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart.
We all saw the depressing news that came out 2 weeks ago about the precedent that was overturned after 50 years. And worse, the bullhorn that came from Justice Thomas as to what rights may be next. And it got me thinking, what beliefs and what values do I want in the judges in my community? And I want judges that view the law like I do. I want judges that believe that the Constitution can be a source of rights, even though they're not specifically listed in that document. I want judges that believe that there are some rights that are so fundamental, no matter what processes are put in place, it'll never be sufficient for the government to take it away. I want judges who view the Constitution as a set of values. And the question is how do those values apply to our circumstances today and not what was happening in the 18th century or 19th century? We should have concerns over the appointment process for gubernatorial appointees of judges in our community. What criteria is going into the potential selection of these people? And I have concerns when time and time again the singular test is membership in the Federalist Society, like my opponent, John Beamer. I have concerns when a husband and wife are both appointed judge within 15 months of each other, both members of the Federalist Society. It is time to stop accepting what we cannot change. It is time to start changing what we cannot accept. And what I cannot accept are governor-appointed Federalist Society judges going unchallenged in my community. I have a duty to fairly and impartially uphold the law, and I will do that if I'm elected. And I have a duty to follow all binding precedent. But that Supreme Court, and I will do that if elected. But if that Supreme Court case, Dobbs, I completely disagree with the legal rationale behind it. There is a constitutional right to abortion, and for the state to deprive a woman and control her body is a fundamental deprivation of her liberty by forcing her to continue a pregnancy with all the risks, physical demands, and life-altering consequences that come from it. Thank you.
Stewart, you heard the question, but I will repeat it for you. What experience in your lifetime or your legal career has caused you to want to be a judge?
The ultimate experience that has caused me to want to be a judge is my experience in the public defender's office. I left private practice from a larger civil defense firm and took a pay cut to work in public service at the public defender's office because civil rights was a passion that I believed in. And fighting and pursuing justice on behalf of indigent clients, case after case, helped shape me to be a better attorney and a better person in this community and defend the rights and liberties of all people. And I think my balanced experience in both civil and criminal practice makes me the most qualified person in this race to serve our community because I'm the only person in this race that has civil and criminal experience as an attorney for 40 years.
Okay, thank you. And Judge Beamer.
I think it really started when I was a child. My parents, despite working 2 jobs at times, often and always gave back to our community. I can remember delivering food boxes at Thanksgiving and at Christmas into small homes from immigrant families. One that came from Russia, didn't understand the language, but they came from a church, and we served them. My father was in the Navy, my uncle was in the Navy, my grandfather was in the Navy. And I was actually the first man in my family not to have served in the military. And when I looked at my particular skill set and what I had, I knew that that's where I needed to be in an area of service. And that's why I'm currently serving as a judge in the United Circuit. I find that this is the impact, or the area where I can impact our community directly. Because we're the branch of government that actually has contact with people. We are more likely to come in contact with our community than anyone else. And I hope that when I do that, I know their cases, I instill their confidence in our judiciary and hope they understand that they have a fair and considerate judge that's listening to their cases without any kind of preconceived notions about what the law should be.
Thank you. Judge Beamer, I'm going to ask you the second question. What would you do if you were on the bench and the law disagreed with what you perceived as justice in the case?
The real answer to that is, depending on what the law is, I think if there's conflict between the Constitution and a particular statute, then the Constitution is what controls over those issues. The issue with family court is the discretion that we actually have. And I do have to explain to people that there is some precedent out there for things that I simply cannot do. That the appellate courts have told us that it's binding on us. I actually have one of those cases, or had one of those cases recently, where my ruling was not, in fact, what I felt in my heart, but it's what the law required. And those are tough decisions. Judges have to make those hard decisions every single time that they are on the bench. And you need somebody that's going to be able to make that unpopular or that hard decision. Because sometimes it might be in your favor, and sometimes it might not be. But you want somebody that's going to be fair when they're doing it.
Thank you. And Mr. Stewart?
I mean, judges have to follow the law, and they have to abide by whatever precedent has been set and imposed upon them. And they can't just go out and overrule or impose their own will on people. However, judges do have the ability to exercise a judicial philosophy and have more discretion in their rulings. And they are able to look at not just text and history and look at, for example, when I talked about earlier the Constitution, well, what were they doing in the 1700s or 1800s when the rule was passed? Well, what's consistent with the purpose and values? And that's what we need from judges who are not just going to look at text and history, but who will look at purpose, values, and consequences, and was that fully considered when the parties make the argument and when you're about to make a ruling. And I think that's something that needs to be considered, not just with the Constitution, but with statutory interpretation as well. But judges do need to follow the law, and if there is binding precedent, you have an obligation to follow it, regardless of your personal opinions.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Let's give them a round of applause. I'd like to invite Judge Tanya Wilson up to the podium for the next group. Thank you.
I need to ask God for a pair of the ones He originally gave me because they are wearing out on me. I do want to thank all of you for inviting Judge Navarro and I to participate in this forum. And as she stated, these are some very large shoes that she and I have to fill with Judge LeBlanc leaving us all and going off on retirement. But it's certainly been a pleasure to be able to be here and to meet all of you. As Nicolette said earlier, I am a circuit judge, and I've been serving in the capacity as a judge since 2014, and I want to thank all of you for that opportunity and for the privilege to be able to serve you in this way. So before we go any further, I want to invite all of the candidates, or both of the candidates for Circuit Group 44 to come up here to the podium. So gentlemen, just as a reminder, each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, then reply for 1 minute, each to 2 questions, and we're going to alternate which speaker answers first. And so please no applause from the audience. And I'm going to be the bad guy. I'm going to be the one to tell you time is up. And as I tell the attorneys in my courtroom, I said, okay, I'm going to give you a 2-minute warning because I am a football advocate. Love football. But this time I don't have a 2-minute warning. I'm just going to say,
just tell me to shut up.
Stop. Hush, please. Or I can do church like everybody say amen. Stop. Okay. So opening statements first. Mr. Bartolone, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for the invitation to come here and speak to you this afternoon. My name is Aldo Bartolone, and I'm running for Circuit Court Judge in Group 44. September will mark 23 years that I've been practicing law in the state of Florida. I started my career as an assistant public defender in South Florida. Yes, I'm a Miami native. Please don't hold that against me. So in that position, I was able to defend indigent people against crimes and against criminal charges levied by the government. I then migrated my practice into a civil division in which I defended personal injury claims like medical malpractice, products liability, auto and general liability. And then we moved here in 2005 to the Orlando area, and it's been home ever since. And once I got here, I took a job with the firm in 2005 doing commercial and business litigation and bankruptcy matters. And in 2008, I went out and opened my own firm, and I've been doing the same thing ever since. I've handled dozens of trials, both jury and non-jury. I've had the privilege of representing over 1,000 individuals, small businesses in this community against overzealous government lawyers, banks, insurance companies, and large corporations. People ask me, why do I want to become a judge? Especially in tumultuous times like these. And that's exactly why, because we need judges with backbone. We're experiencing a time where the stability of our laws and constitution have been upended. A time where the established rights of our citizens have been left in shambles by political and religious zealots that sit on the bench. A judge has to be dedicated to the impartial application of the law. But at the same time, they have to faithfully serve the people. I've had the opportunity to fight Goliath on a daily basis in my practice, and I intend to bring that to the bench. There's the principle that no one is above the law and everyone is entitled to equal protection of the law. So when you go to the ballot box, you can be sure that I'm the one who's going to be ensuring the equal protection of every single one of you in this room. Thank you.
Judge Chiu?
Thank you. It's an honor to address my fellow members of the League of Women Voters today. I'm Vince Chiu. I'm currently a sitting circuit judge. I've got 18 years of public service experience. Prior to taking the bench about 3 years ago, I spent most of my career as an assistant United States attorney. I handled probably about 50 jury trials over the course of my career, mostly in complex and serious cases. I was part of the Pulse investigation. I led the investigation against hate crimes against Jewish community centers, including the Maitland JCC, and I won an award from the Anti-Defamation League for that. And I've been in family and civil court as a judge, but all that you can read about. I want to tell you a little bit about me as a person. I don't come from a lot. My parents came here about a year before I was born. They scraped out a little life for themselves as running a small business eventually. I know what it's like to be on the outside. I'm the first person in my family to graduate college. And that experience is very much a part of who I am. I'm most proud of the fact that I am the proud father of 3 amazing kids, 11, 9, and 6, 2 daughters and a boy. And I'm proud to be the supportive husband of a brilliant and successful female attorney, and with whom I've had the privilege of navigating the balance of family and work together as equal partners. Look, the best indicator, though, of a judge, who a judge is going to be, is the judge that they've been. I have a laundry list of endorsements. I'm not going to bore you with them. I have the overwhelming support of the legal community, but you don't have to take my word for that. How many lawyers do we have in the room today? Well, show of hands, please. Ask them. Who has lawyer friends? Ask them. You don't have to rely on tidbits of information as to whether or not I'm a zealot. You can just ask them. Thank you.
Okay. So most voters don't get a chance to know about judicial candidates, Mr. Bartolone. So what do you want voters to know about you when they are looking over their ballots and they're asking themselves why you are deserving of their vote?
Well, there are 3 basic qualities that I think that any judicial candidate needs to have. You've got experience, you've got integrity, and you got independence. I mean, I have more than 2 decades of experience of representing the people and the small businesses of our community, saving their homes, saving their business, being accountable to their families, their employees. And I think that provides the empathy that a judge needs in order to judge not just the law, but the facts themselves. You have to understand the facts before you can judge them. Integrity ensures that every party will have, will be afforded the equal protection of the law, no matter the circumstances. And I am stubbornly independent, so I'm going to do what I have to make sure that every single person's rights are protected.
Thank you. And Judge Chiu, same question. What do you want voters to know about you when they ask themselves why you are deserving of their vote?
But I mean, I think I agree with my opponent. I think it's empathy, it's integrity, and what I want them to know about me are what the lawyers are saying about me. You can go to my website, you can look at all the things that folks have to say about me. You can talk to your lawyer friends. What I've shown over the 3 years is that every person who comes into my courtroom gets that empathy, gets that level of attention and care, gets the level of preparation before each hearing. And that is, what I think is most important, that when you go into a courtroom, the judge has read every letter that your lawyer or you have given to him and have prepared and thought and agonized over those decisions. And that is the reputation I have, not the one that you have to wonder or hope I'm going to have.
So, when we think about judges, one of the first things that we think about is integrity and ethics. So I want you to describe an instance in when you faced an ethical dilemma and how you resolved it. Can he get like 5 extra seconds? I'm just 5 more seconds.
You're taking my 5 seconds now.
Mr. Bartolone, too. Okay, we'll start over.
I mean, look, for me, I haven't really felt like there are dilemmas of ethics for me, because most issues of ethics are clear. Your ethical rules are it is or it isn't. And if it's going to hurt me and it would violate the ethics rule, I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to do it. Or if it's not going to hurt me, or let me back that up. Even if it's going to hurt me and the ethics rules require me to do it, I'm going to do it. Because none of this is worth losing the ability to look at yourself in the mirror and losing the public trust in you. So, I mean, that's really what it is. I've always been who I am, and I'm going to be who I'm going to be. And if that's good enough, I hope it is.
Thank you so much. Mr. Bartolone, same question to you. Describe an instance in which you faced an ethical dilemma and how you resolved it.
Well, when you spend a lot of time in private practice, you do come across ethical dilemmas because you have the obligation to zealously represent your client, but at the same time you have to follow ethical rules. And I did come upon a situation once where I had a client who I was obligated to represent, and it was a civil proceeding, but he was accused of running a Ponzi scheme worth about $40 million. And unfortunately, there were facts that came to light that he had hidden from me, from my office. And the way I would resolve that ethical dilemma was I withdrew from the case. Because you have to be, Judge Chiu is right, you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror in the morning. You have to be able to wake up and say, I did the right thing. And so it's that standard that I hold every day that I walk into my office, every day that I represent clients. It's that high ethical standard that I bring to the table.
And I think I have like 30 seconds left.
I'm taking that much of your time. Well, thank you very much for both of you gentlemen for bringing us today. What many of you might not have caught is that Judge Chiu and I actually were colleagues at the U.S. Attorney's Office, hence the friendly banter back and forth. I think we were just like a couple of offices down, and for a good part of our career, we worked together. So it's good to be able to work with him again. All right, so league members, the mic to my left is now open for your questions, and it's going to be moderated by our membership chair, Pat Grierson. And before we start, I want to put out this disclaimer first. Florida Judicial Canon 7A, subsection 3E, strictly prohibits judges and judicial candidates from discussing their views on issues or controversies that are likely to come before the court. So kindly keep that in mind when posing your questions. And I know that's probably stymied a few of you in the questions that you might like to opposed to them, but they are, as candidates for judicial office, they are bound by those rules, by those judicial candidates. So with that in mind, please line up if you have a question, and all 9th Circuit Court candidates, please come forward, and we will have the lead members to my left.
So this is a tradition, and the rules are that you have to be a member, one question, no lecture, and you can address your questions to one of the candidates or all of the candidates.
I just want you all to stand this way and over this way, and then we will have lead members pose their questions, and if it's to one particular one, then you guys can take the mics, and I feel like I'm in the way here, so.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here today. My name is Chiu. I'm a lead member, but I'm also the organizer with Families for Strong Public Schools. So my question is, if you have children, do they attend public schools?
As the one who doesn't have children yet. Sorry. As the one who doesn't have kids yet, I figured, let me get ahead of the question. But I can say this, I grew up in public schools here. I believe in them. My mom worked in them for over 20 years. My mom, Kiki Pappas, right there, shout out. Berkshire Elementary, worked with our special needs children to help them fulfill their potential for decades. I'm also a proud Winter Park High School graduate. And again, so I know the magic of public schools. I'm a product. Again, a lot of tidbits.
And that'll be 30 seconds.
No, it'll be less than that. I'm proud that I have just enrolled my son in kindergarten at Orange County Public School, first in K through 8. He will be starting August 10th. As sad as I am that he's getting growing up.
I've had kids in public school, and they're not currently.
My oldest is in public school. The other two are not, because they're not in kindergarten yet. They just beat on each other at home.
Well, I have 3 teenagers, 2 of which graduated from public schools. They graduated from Windermere High School, and I have a 17-year-old who's going into her senior year at Windermere High School. They've gone to public schools their entire childhood, just like I went to the public school system in Miami.
I have one child, and he is not in public school.
Hi, my name's Denise Hammond, and I'd like you to please raise your hand if you have firearms in your home, and if so, what kind do you have? Okay, sure.
I have one handgun, semi-automatic handgun from when I was a assistant United States trained.
Thank you.
I have a pistol, a rifle, and a shotgun.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to?
Hello, my name is Rosemary DeRocher, and I'm a lifetime member of the League of Women Voters. This is a question you can just raise your hand for. How many of you are members or have been members of the Federalist Society?
I was a member for less than 6 months, and I canceled my membership.
You canceled it?
I did. I did not wait for it to expire. I canceled it.
Thank you.
And I was previously a member, but I also canceled that.
Go on.
I'm currently a member, just like I'm a member of my church.
Well, we're all confessing our sins. I like the Facebook group because I was in the same running group with their owner back in 2011. So that's, I'll confess my sin, but it was a Facebook.
Hello, I'm Roger Wheaton. I'm a local lawyer here, practicing for 42 years. Rosemary DeRocher is a longtime friend of mine, and her husband married my wife and I. So recently been here, but our heart's been here for a long time. But this is kind of a follow-up question from Rosemary. how many of you all would consider yourself a textualist in terms of interpreting the law?
You want to show hands?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know.
Just one person? Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Cynthia McKinnon, and I was formerly a circuit judge for almost 20 years, but I've been retired probably before some of you were born. Definitely weren't a lot of you practicing law. So I know that having had this experience, it's stressful, probably not your favorite part of campaigning, but it's very helpful to people like us and to the voters. So thank you for being here. Rosemary asked my question. I wanted to know which of you were or had been members of the Federalist Society. And I'd just like to ask you, Judge Beamer, since you're the only current member, what, if any, impact does that have on how you approach, or how you would approach this job?
The Federalist Society doesn't have any impact on how I do my job. I do my job the way that it's supposed to be done, by being a fair and impartial judge. Just the same as my faith doesn't impact the way that I do my job. I think that's what the people need. Is somebody's going to do their job regardless of what they believe or what organizations they're a part of.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Diane Holmes, and I'm an attorney who's been in practice for over 40 years. And through my practice professionally, sadly, in the legal profession, we still experience gender bias. So my question for all of you is, you're people. People are people. And how can you assure me that you sitting on the bench will not allow your personal thoughts and prejudices and biases that do exist to come out and discriminate against me, or more importantly, the person that I'm representing? And that's for all of you, please.
As I said, I'm proud to be the husband of an amazing woman lawyer, and I've seen the struggles that Alicia, who's here, has gone through. I can say this, for me, gender equity is not a principle, it's a lifestyle. And we have sacrificed, individually, parts of our careers for each other at times, because we believe that each of our careers is equally important. And I think that will extend to my career.
I'm also married to an incredibly wonderful woman who handles everything that keeps the crazy train of our family on track in terms of gender equity and specifically Ms. Holmes, I think you're stating about gender bias. But biases in general, I agree. We're all people. We all have our experiences that influence how we do things. And I've learned that there are certain issues that come before me that sometimes I can lose my objectivity to. And when that happens, I have the courage to pull myself off of that case and disqualify myself.
Since my mother's here, I can say that, because at least one person will agree. I am an incredibly wonderful woman. So I can speak to that from the first person, thank you guys. But on a more serious note, it's about experiences and where you come from. I'm a first-generation American and a native Central Floridian. I saw what my mom and dad had to go through when they came to this country. I am also the first in my family to go to law school, and only the second, or actually only the third, to even finish college. Time. Thank you.
So, gender equity is not a lifestyle, it's a right. It's an inherent right that everyone has. Women, men, no matter what your gender identity is or race. That is something, more than 80% of my practice is representing members of minority communities and women. And that is something that I hold dear to my heart. I think the person who asked the question would want me to bring my personal and professional experiences into the courtroom, because that will ensure that every single woman gets exactly the same chance as every man that walks in.
I mean, every person has a right to be treated equally and fairly when they come before the court. And I mean, from my experience, I We want to treat every person with the same amount of dignity and equity and self-reflect and make sure you are treating every person, and I would commit to do that if elected.
I'm Lisa Atkins, and I'm with the League. You see me in the email box often, I'm sure. I'm a believer in the quiet thunder of the courts and of judges, and I'm really tired of seeing judges in the news. From all of you, how are you going to keep yourself from being newsworthy?
All right, let me take this one since I was probably most recently in the news. But I would use that as an example. So I had a case involving the Orange County ban on the sale of retail dogs and cats. And the parties wanted to make it over whether or not Orange County should have a ban on the retail sale of dogs and cats. And my ruling, when they tried to stop it, was that the place to have that conversation was in the Orange County Commission. And that's what I told them, that's how I ruled, and that is probably the best indicator of how I would address that issue.
I think one of the best ways for staying out of the news is to do your job the correct way. But we always don't get to choose the cases that come in front of us. Sometimes there may be cases that have a media presence. We've seen them over the years, especially here in Central Florida in the criminal realm. But sometimes you can't keep yourself out of the news. But I can tell you, you can keep yourself out of the news from a negative standpoint by doing the job that people need you to do.
A lot of times judges don't look for the news, but the news looks for them. And that's the problem, is that, when there's a high media profile case or anything that's of a political topic, the media is coming looking for you. So I think it's very difficult for a judge to keep themselves out of the public eye when the media is putting you in it.
I don't know how to stop the news from being interested in the case, but I know that my headline would read, "Judge works overtime, keeps jury there to get trial done on time." Thank you.
I'm not sure if you've noticed, but I am the least attention-seeking person up here. I have had lots of criminal cases that have been reported on in the news. I've been offered opportunities to speak to the press. I always turn them down. I try not to tell them my name. So if I'm the judge on the case, I'm just not going to tell them my name.
Hi, I'm Lori Wordsall, and I'm a criminal defense attorney in Orlando. And so something that's important to our community is, A, do you think that there is an issue with implicit racial bias in the justice system? And if so, what could you do as a judge to help battle that?
Yes. Yes is a complete sentence. To do that, we have to figure out context. We have to have the patience to listen to all sides. It is easy when we see, especially when judges are playing with mandatory minimum sentencing, it is easy to see the person standing before there is another number, particularly if it's the 50th today with the same skin color. So I ask, not just of you all, but the other candidates here today to break through that.
Time.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you deal with that on the court by soul searching and calibrating. We all have our prejudices and biases. The question is whether we know them, whether we are in touch with them, and whether we can recalibrate them as we rule on the bench.
I think that what's necessary is, in order to break the school-to-prison pipeline that's been created by many of the prosecutors around the country, is in order to do that, we need to use judicial discretion to create diversion programs. That way, these youthful offenders aren't condemned for the rest of their life, that they're entitled to second chances and a bright future, rather than being condemned to being a felon for the rest of their lives, doing nothing but landscaping. That's not fair.
Ms. Wordsall, I just want to make sure you're talking about the criminal context and not just in all contexts, correct? The short answer is yes. I think actually becomes most prevalent with our pro se individuals, and actually the language barrier that often associates itself with different races, different minorities. And I think that one of the things that we do is, if there was a way to increase funding for interpreters, when people are in court, I deal with a lot of pro se individuals whose language is not, or their first language is not English, and it becomes very difficult for them to operate within the system.
Time.
Yes, but I don't think it's just in pro se cases or cases involving people where English is the second language. It's in all cases. And it's important that people have self-reflection, and most importantly, that we're having thorough jury selections and making sure jurors are recognizing it as well and getting them to acknowledge it to make sure we're getting true and just verdicts in our courtrooms.
I take court-appointed cases in addition to my private criminal practice, and so I've definitely seen it occur in cases, and I think sometimes it starts before we even get to the court. So I think on the court, what we need to be aware of is it may have started with law enforcement before we even have the case, and we just need to keep that in mind and make the most fair decisions we can in the case.
Thank you. We have 2 more minutes left, so this is probably our last question.
So Shannon Rose, I am a community advocate. HB 1435 was enacted July 1st that regards new music and loud music 25 feet. There is always a disenfranchisement in the minority community. The new law says that if music is played within 25 feet of a church, a hospital, or a school, it is a misdemeanor offense. If that case comes before you, how will you rule? It's a very broad.
They can't answer that question.
Okay. You figure out how to reword it. Okay. Right, because that's huge right now for me. Juvenile was brought up. How do you intend, there's a disenfranchisement with minority children being over-sentenced. How do you intend to handle that as a judge?
They couldn't answer that one either. The issue there, your questions are very probing, great questions. The judicial canons prohibit them from being able to answer questions on issues that might come before them. And if they are sitting in the juvenile court, then that very issue very well could be before them.
Are there any diversion programs that you intend as judge to bring before the court?